Hello, today we're going to talk about different mechanisms of evolution. So first, a couple of new words. So adaptation, a change in the process or the process of change by which an organism or species becomes better suited to its environment. Again, this does not happen within that organism's particular lifespan. Adaptations happen over multiple generations of time. And then fitness is the capacity of an organism to survive and transmit its genotype to reproductive offspring as compared to competing organisms. So the life of an organism is all about being able to pass on your genetic information. So if an organism is able to survive long enough to be able to reproduce, that is like deemed a successful life or a fit life. So the more efficient or more fit an organism is, the better it's able to survive to that reproductive age. That's really what all fitness is about. And then also the fitness of their offspring will also be fit as well, and so on and so on. Okay, so different mechanisms of evolution, starting with speciation and its different kinds. So speciation is the formation of new and distinct species in the course of evolution. Again, this is caused by those natural selection shifts just continuing to separate or move further and further away from each other, or continually be in effect. Now, allopatric speciation is the physical isolation of a biological population by an extrinsic barrier, evolving an intrinsic reproductive isolation. So that would be like you have some kind of physical barrier that separates one environment from another. If environments are different, you're going to have different things that would be advantageous for survival, different mutations happening, different selective pressures, and you end up getting a new species that way. Sympatric speciation is the evolution of new species from a single ancestral species while living in the same habitat. So basically, there's new species that come into existence, but when those new species come into existence, they don't mate with other existing species there, and that's because of this phenomenon known as polyploidy, which essentially just means that the species of one kind of plant in this image has a different chromosome number than the species of the other plants around it. And because their chromosomes are essentially incompatible with one another, they can't breed with one another. And then as far as the rest of the differences between allopatric and sympatric, I'll let you read on that. Okay, another mechanism of evolution is coevolution and convergent evolution. Okay, so coevolution is where basically organisms of different species influence each other's evolution. So that could be something as extravagant as endosymbiosis, where one organism like absorbs or becomes a part of another, or it can just simply be around them. So things like competition, predation, parasitism, commensalism, mutualism, all those things. Commensalism is where one species benefits, the other is just unaffected. Mutualism is where both species benefit. And parasitism is where one benefits while the other is negatively affected. And then competition and predation are fairly simple to understand. For example, like how species can affect each other, I'll talk about predation with this. So say one species is becoming better and better at camouflaging, blending, or hiding in the environment. That would affect the predators, because the predators would need to be able to still eat and survive. So the predators with better vision, better hunting skills, whatever, that trait continually increases, while the camouflage or hiding skills of the prey continue to increase as well. So that's how coevolution affects, or how species affect each other through coevolution. Okay, convergent evolution. So this one is pretty interesting. It's basically life finding different ways to do the same thing. So bats, birds, insects, they have many differences in their DNA, many different genes, but they all found a way to fly or move in the air. So again, you can just look at them structurally: bat wings, bird wings, insect wings, all very different DNA found as a way to do the same. Okay, next, punctuated equilibrium and gradualism. So gradualism is a hypothesis that evolution proceeds by imperceptibly small cumulative steps over long periods of time, rather than by abrupt major changes. And punctuated equilibrium is essentially saying the opposite, that evolutionary development is marked by isolated episodes of rapid speciation between long periods of little or no change. So in reality, evolution, in my opinion, is more like a blend of the punctuated model and the gradual model, but scientists have found evidence of both the punctuated model and the graduated model to exist. Punctuated model or punctuated equilibrium is more likely to happen when you have some kind of disaster or great change in the environment or population of life that exists in a community. Gradual model just happens, with more stability. So evolution is always happening. Gradual model would be like the slowest means by which evolution occurs. Okay, next, genetic drift. So genetic drift is the variation in the relative frequency of different genotypes in a small population, owing to the chance disappearance of particular genes as individuals die or do not reproduce. So this would be an example of how punctuated equilibrium could be brought about with genetic drift. There's two different kinds of genetic drift. There's the bottleneck effect and the founder effect. So the bottleneck effect says basically you start with an original population of some kind, and then some sort of disaster happens where a bunch of life was eliminated. And by chance, the surviving population was mostly one kind of genes or traits, while a lot of the organisms that died had other kinds of genes or traits. So if you look, if the original population had mostly, the orange dots or marbles, but then some kind of disaster happens and just by coincidence, mostly red and green marbles survived, they're going to populate, reproduce, and you end up getting different allele frequencies with this new population than you did the original population. Founder effect is the same principle, except there's no disaster. It's just if you've got an original population, there's new land, new space, new whatever environment, and some, but not all of the original population goes to this new place to basically expand. They'll reproduce and basically have a new population of different allele frequencies than the original. So in that founder effect picture, if only orange and black butterflies go to the new island, they're going to repopulate and essentially make only orange and black butterflies, while the original had orange, black, and white butterflies. Okay, gene flow. This is the last mechanism of evolution we're going to talk about today. So gene flow, also called gene migration, is the introduction of genetic material by interbreeding from one population of a species to another, thereby changing the composition of the gene pool of the receiving population. The introduction of new alleles through gene flow increases variability within the population and makes new combinations of traits. In humans, gene flow usually comes about through the actual migration of human populations, either voluntary or forced. So if you look in this picture on the right, you have one set of birds that is recessive for a particular trait, while one set of birds is homozygous dominant for a particular trait. If a recessive bird flies over to the dominant bird group starts interbreeding, you're going to start getting a mix of those genes. Same thing if the dominant birds flew over to the recessive. So it looks very similar to the founder effect, but the difference is that there's already two populations existing, and they're just basically exchanging genes with one another, as opposed to the founder effect, it's one population going to start a new population. And then this is just a last picture that I like that I found. It just kind of highlights some key differences between things. Thank you for watching. Please share and subscribe, and remember to spread kindness.